our objectives. By using an approach that blends trade papers and production management theory, we have conducted research into 4 intersecting areas of VFX and reflected on our own filmmaking experience. These include the relationship between the VFX producer and the marketing department, advantages and disadvantages of working as a VFX producer in relation to sustainability, analysis of organizational creativity, labor, and cloud solutions in the VFX industry, and power dynamics, exploring the hierarchies of the VFX firms and studios. Hello, today we're going to be discussing the relationship between the VFX production manager or producer and the marketing department. So they work really closely together for any promotional material, so any trailers or posters, anything to get audiences interest peaked and really hyped up to go see this movie. The VFX producer, they know the story, so they're going to be able to anticipate the needs of the marketing department by saying, this is a really good scene, this isn't as good of a scene, this scene is going to be better for the trailer, and then they can, when they're making their schedule, say, we're going to do this one first, this one's going to be last. That way there's no rush or last minute panic when it comes to the marketing department being like, hey, we need a trailer. They don't just know the story, they also know the studio. So they know what is wanting to be kept a secret. A great example of this is Captain America Civil War. So there was no mention of Spider-Man when it came to the trailers. And the trailers and any posters, nothing. It was just the main Avengers pretty much, and Bucky Barnes. In the movie, we get this amazing moment of Spider-Man doing a flip and coming in, and everyone's just like, what? That's so cool! Had he been in the trailer, it would have been completely ruined and spoiled, and we wouldn't have gotten that moment. All of those scenes have to go from the VFX producer to the marketing department because everything's done with green screen, or the actors running on treadmills instead of actually running. So they're the ones that are passing along the finished or temporary good enough product from the VFX stage to the marketing to be released. So that VFX producer had to ensure they didn't give anything away with Spider-Man to the marketing department. An amazing case study is Sonic the Hedgehog. So in 2019, the Sonic the Hedgehog trailer was released, and fans immediately took to social media to say, he's creepy, he's humanoid, we don't like him. And the production studios, Sega and Paramount Pictures, agreed, and were like, we're going to push back the release date, we're going to push it back 3 months, and completely redesign him. And because they did that, it was a commercial success. Had they not shown an accurate representation of what Sonic was going to look like beforehand, they wouldn't have gotten that accurate feedback, and it might not have been a success. They might not have had that sequel that just came out last month. So it's such an important thing. So why should the VFX producer care about working with the marketing department? Because of money. I know working for me, any project I'm working on, I don't want to spend my own money. I want to spend someone else's money. So the marketing department will be like, here's some money. I need this trailer. So instead of that money coming from my budget, it's going to come from someone else's budget. Also, time management. I don't want to make my artists work overtime and rush them and burn them out. So if I can plan, if I can anticipate the marketing department's needs and plan correctly, or even discussing with them to plan correctly, it's going to work better for everyone. And that is why they have such a great relationship with the marketing department and the VFX producer.
Hi, I'm Hannah, and this is the pros and cons of working as a VFX producer and how it helps to lower the carbon emissions. The pros and cons of working with VFX are shown on screen, and since COVID, film and TV companies have embraced more innovative ways of filming, which is VFX, as less crew are needed, and therefore the spread of COVID can be stopped. There's no need to film any dangerous stunts, which is a massive pro in that section, and a big con would be making game characters into big screen characters, as discussed by my other member in my group. Sonic the Hedgehog was animated, and the reception was not good, so they had to reanimate, which did take a couple more months. That is a negative because it's more time consuming and it takes much more time. During The Lion King, which was directed by Jon Favreau, they used VR to simulate the camera movements working in the studios, which means that there was less need for transport of the cast members and other crew members, and it kept it quite nice and tight, so it was quite personal for the director to direct. He did say you start from the bottom, knowing that this will take a couple years' work, which is a negative, and transport isn't necessary as it's studio. The world is your oyster, and you have the ability to take certain set designs in and out. This is the UK's first carbon-neutral virtual production film. It used 10 locations from one studio, and many of the time it was just a logistical dream because you don't need any extras as they can be added in later, and physical props which will reduce wasted on set will also be added in later, and the film aims to illustrate the environmental benefits of virtual production, which I think it does very well. As shown by these two images, 51% of emissions are from travel, and as the BAFTA scene, as from the light blue here, and from my own personal project, which is shown in the yellow, where this is all location based. From the neutral carbon emissions in the previous slide, it shows that they're so much higher up than these projects of studio and location based, as transport will be needed constantly so people can travel back and forth. Either way, VFX productions are a win-win, and they help to lower the carbon emissions and help to create more unique productions.
Hi, I'm Jamie. I'm going to be providing an analysis of organisational creativity, labour and cloud solutions in the VFX industry. Being a production manager has the conflicting idea of organising creativity. Often we think of artists as people who are autonomous and resist systemic management, so should be left to their devices. VFX is inherently artistic and so complex that its involvement spans from pre all the way to post. So how is it organised? Spell from Natal suggests that VFX project management works as a heterarchy which has organisational creativity embedded in it. And a heterarchy is where every element is overlapping and equally important as the other, and can communicate between every part, which builds trusting relationships between everyone, and creativity is embedded in that complex organisation. They argue that VFX project management's complexity is the reason it works, with a heterarchy encouraging this trust and allowing creativity to flourish with on-the-job learning and networks of people always brought on. This heterarchy is similar to the way our student shoots work this semester, with a lot of temporary project crews, lots of overlap, repeated working relationships, and developing reputations with each other for potential future recruitment on other projects. If you get one person on crew, chances are they have a friend who will want to join too, same way a VFX supervisor brings with them people that they've previously worked with. The complex nature of VFX has allowed a negative practice to emerge at the detriment of VFX firms. That is, the bidding wars between VFX firms when they're trying to get a project, which affects profitability and long-term prospects. VFX firms are often picked based on local government subsidies offered, which saves the big corporations money. However, this means that the majority of VFX artists are nomads and have to relocate wherever the work is. Whichever firm can bid the smallest doable budget will get the project, often making employees have to crunch and work overtime, sometimes unpaid. And due to the transnational nature of the industry, it's difficult for them to unionize and combat this. Between 2003 and 2013, over 20 VFX firms filed for bankruptcy or closed down. Riverman Hughes is the most famous example, having won the Oscar for Life of Pi posthumously. Recently, NPC Vancouver, who did Sonic the Hedgehog, shut down due to lack of profit, being unable to compete with tax rebates elsewhere. Staff had to crunch 17-hour days to redesign Sonic after a marketing disaster, as Bree mentioned. One potential solution which could improve the problems of rivalry would be switching to a cloud-based workflow. Benefits include an unlimited amount of users and improved security. Cost of home machines can vary depending on the task, and VFX artists wouldn't have to move around like nomads anymore. Untold Studios created a Christmas advert for John Lewis, Excitable Edgar, which was made entirely through a cloud workflow, so there is the potential for this to be a thing. The main drawback, though, is the high cost, especially if the companies already have in-office machines already. And the cloud-based workflows aren't standardized, so it would require customization for each company. Similarly, our production houses use a cloud workflow to manage and organize our slate. Using Google Drive, each project had its own folder, and every member of Denali could upload and edit files simultaneously. Having all the crew certificates in one place made assembling the risk assessments much more efficient.
Hi, my name is Serena, and today I'm going to be talking about the power relations regarding the visual effects industry, and further discussing this hierarchy of studios and their influence on visual effects firms. The examples used in the sources are firms in Australia, Canada, and the UK. According to Rachel Parker and Stephen Cox, due to the closures of the special effects departments in the Hollywood studios around the 1960s, this had Hollywood outsourcing these effects to specialist firms. With this outsourcing, the demand for visual effects had greatly increased and the cost had also decreased, and this in turn had created more opportunities and potential success for these VFX firms. However, quoting Parker and Cox, the production sector is very heavily dependent on the US media conglomerates, on whom they typically rely on for both finance and distribution of their films. As such, these VFX firms are greatly impacted by the global production networks of the media giants. From this, Hollywood studios have created a huge competition, which has, to quote further, enabled them to reduce labour and location costs. For these outside visual effects firms, they now need to compete with each other, and they look to the Hollywood production films as they provide sustainability with these large budgets. And this competition here has also further increased, as there are only 20 to 30 films being produced per year that has this large budget. For the VFX firms located outside of Hollywood, they had to go global in order to provide themselves sustainability. However, moving to this global market brings further competition on being hired for the big budget Hollywood films. These VFX firms must understand business in order to compete, which in turn creates this rivalry. It impacts the knowledge sharing and inter-firm collaboration, and it now raises this question of who do you share your knowledge with, and it's very strategic and very business orientated. But these firms don't get to choose who they collaborate or share their knowledge with. In this case, the largest studios being Hollywood, it controls the collaborations of these visual effects firms. They get to choose which business works with which. Not only this, but these firms have to please the Hollywood client. To even be considered, they need to have an established reputation, not only through the social relations, but through market considerations. And only then can they begin to have more power in the business with Hollywood. Overall, these larger studios have a larger power. They are able to pick and choose what they want and who they want, and this in turn impacts the SME's development, in this case being the visual effects firms. In this case, the VFX firms have to please the Hollywood before they even begin to make their own creative decisions. Everything is for the benefit of the larger studios so they can supply sustainability for these smaller firms. So to conclude our presentation, throughout our research we have discovered that the VFX producer's relationship with marketing is vital, otherwise incidents like the human Sonic happen. The VFX has had a positive impact on the film and TV's carbon footprint by reducing travel emissions. The VFX uses an effective hierarchy to run smoothly, similar to the framework, but that the VFX industry still suffers from labour exploitation. And finally, the VFX firms are bound to the hierarchy of the Hollywood studios and have to compete with each other in order to survive.